Hi, and welcome to Let's Grow. I'm Linda Kelly, your host and the founder of the Kelly Mental Health Foundation. I'm here today with Kelly Graham, who is a social worker and not registered psychotherapist, but social worker and psychotherapist. And today we're going to be talking about a really important topic, one that comes up a lot for us mental health workers, and it's about children and anxiety. Hi, Kelly.
Hi.
Welcome, and thank you again for coming on the show. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah. Love being here.
You're very easy to talk to. So just briefly, could you just tell us a bit about yourself for people who haven't seen our last interview?
So I work at the Kelly Mental Health Clinic. I've been in the social work field for about 10 years, around there. I'm really kind of more drawn to sexual assault and animal-assisted therapy, but we see a variety of people in our practice, and children and anxiety are quite big ones.
It's huge. It seems to be, I'm not sure now if it's more common than it was, or if it's more just that we recognize it now for what it is. I mean, it seems to me in the past, people would just take more of a tough love approach. You know, if you have anxiety, I'm still going to kick your butt to school, go.
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to now we know the impact of that. We want to be better parents. We want to raise more resilient kids. And so the example that I had brought you in about was a friend of mine that has two young kids, and one of them unfortunately just refuses to go to school anymore, to the point that she is having panic attacks when she has to approach the school. And of course, a panic attack for people who are not aware is just that feeling like you're going to die. Your heart rate your heart's pounding through the roof, and can't breathe, things like that. So, and then of course she's reacting by becoming violent sometimes. Sometimes she, hits her mother, she's screaming, it gets completely escalated. And so this poor mom is just going, what in the world do I do here? Is this my fault? What is going on here? So I'm just curious, for what you've seen in therapy. Have you seen situations like this?
Absolutely. I think it comes up quite often, and like you said before, whether it's just we're noticing it more now and being more empathetic to it, or if it's always kind of been there, but we do have the tough love approach. I mean, looking back on it, I had anxiety growing up, but I didn't know what it was. I remember whenever there was a long break from school, I would always feel so anxious going back, and I would just get sick in my stomach, and I didn't know why. I had no idea until I was older and realized I have anxiety.
Right.
That's what that feeling is. But a lot of the times kids can't say that. They can't be like, I'm anxious about this. They just know the physical symptoms, such as my tummy's upset, or I don't feel good, or they react in anger and throwing tantrums because they don't really know what's going on in their body, and they can have a hard time kind of naming those feelings. So a lot of the times you can see kids either avoiding school or throwing tantrums before they're going to school, and it could be a sign of anxiety.
So that physical manifestation, that seems to be pretty prominent for them. The upset tummy. We hear of that one all the time.
Oh yeah.
Right, and of course, as a parent or a caregiver, grandparent, you can't really send the kid to school when they say that they're about to throw up.
Yeah.
Right. So you're just saying too that kids don't have the language to be able to express that.
They know kind of their basic things, happy, sad, but a lot of that they're still learning. So it's good to have a conversation with them about kind of what they're feeling and help them identify if they're feeling anxious and help them give a label to that so they know that it is a normal feeling to have. Maybe not in the situation, but it is a normal feeling that everybody has, and that's okay if they're feeling that way.
Right. I think a lot of parents would be more likely to try to ask what the problem is first, right? So I hear you saying that it's best to kind of help them understand what is going on in their body, whereas I think as a parent, kid doesn't want to go to school, my first thought is going to be, well, what's happening? Are you getting bullied? Are you, is someone being mean to you? Are you, is the work too hard? And so that's more situation focused, right?
And that is good to look at too.
Yeah.
Because especially if it's just kind of coming on out of nowhere, you don't really know what's going on. You don't know. There could be something going on at school, such as bullying or You don't know. So it is good to check those situational factors as well to kind of have a better understanding of what could be triggering the anxiety.
Right, right. Of course, you got to know what's actually happening and what situation is bringing it on. And so, how would you, as a therapist, start, teaching a child that language, that meaning? How could you drive home those lessons?
Well, it's really helping them identify their physical symptoms, kind of what they're feeling, kind of letting them know that it escalates. It doesn't go from 0 to 100, but kind of getting them to recognize the warning symptoms that anxiety has and helping them put language to that, and then helping them be able to calm themselves down. And it's good for the parents to know these tricks too, because it's not just telling your kid, okay, go relax, because they aren't going to do it. They don't know what to do. But it's really doing it with them to kind of help show them what to do and to kind of help be there with them to help ease their anxiety. So if you're going to be practicing deep breathing, so breathing in for the count of 5, then breathing out, it's good to practice that with your child. Or even more kind of kid-friendly coping skills, we say. If you take the hand, you could do the breathing on the hand. So you breathe in, and then you breathe out. Then you breathe in, and you kind of trace the finger. That gives them something to kind of focus on as they're breathing, and it helps kind of slow their breathing down, which helps their anxiety. And just you doing that with them helps them feel better, because then they know what they're doing. They are expected to go and know all of these skills all of a sudden. You can help teach them and build up that skill box for them.
That's a really interesting activity, and it's very similar to one that I learned where it was like just tracing circles in the palm. So every time you do a circle, breathe in, and then breathe out, and it's combining that sensory feeling.
Yes.
So you're kind of grounding yourself in your own body, and it's a nice feeling too with the breathing, which is then kind of helping you work double time and calming down.
Yeah.
Right. So some parents, or well, really anyone that is unfamiliar with breathing techniques might just say, well, that's not solving the problem, right? So you're just taking a few deep breaths, and then does that mean that as soon as they get in the car or get on the bus, they're going to panic, right? So I think in that situation, it's probably important to let people know that if you're establishing anxiety on like a rating scale from 1 to 10, that if they're at a 7 when they start doing this and this brings it down to a 5, that doesn't mean that they jump right back up to a 7, right? Yes. It has calmed them enough for them to function.
Absolutely, and especially when you go over it more and more, they're gonna, if they're on the bus freaking out, they can be like, okay, I remember what mommy was doing. We'll do this. We'll just breathe while I'm on the bus. And they can help learn those skills and use those skills as they need them when you're not there.
And that's another thing that you bring up too, is making sure that they learn the skills not in the moment when they're panicking.
Yes. When you're learning stuff and you're in the moment panicking, it's not going to stay because you're panicking, you're trying to calm yourself down. So it's good to use the skills every time, even before you go to bed. Hey, let's practice these skills. Let's just practice some deep breathing. It's great before bed too, because then it also just relaxes them, so they can go to sleep a little bit easier.
Can confirm, have used it. Yeah, sometimes you're laying in bed and you don't realize how stiff you are, how your body is not relaxing into the bed. So the breathing techniques can certainly make a big impact.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the impact of children's anxiety on parents. Stay with us. Welcome back to Let's Grow. I'm Linda Kelly, your host, and I'm here once again with one of my favorite guests, Kelly Graham, and we are discussing children and anxiety. So what we left off with was the impact on the parents. So as I mentioned, this friend of mine that has her child that's going through this, and she's one of many. But she then worries, is this my fault? Is this genetic, this predisposition to anxiety? Is this something that I placed on her. This particular parent has gone through a separation. There's all of these questions I think that come up for parents. So I'm just curious about what your experience has been, the impact on parents dealing with this kind of thing.
I have anxiety myself, and I have a stepdaughter, and I've known her since she was 1. And I'm terrified. I'm terrified that she's going to have anxiety because of me. So I'm always trying to be as relaxed as possible and not freak out and be anxious. But that's hard in your daily life, to just get rid of your anxiety because of your child. And it is something that puts a lot of pressure on us. And it's something that we have to be mindful of, kind of what we're doing. But it's not all our fault. A lot of it is situational factors, what's happening at school, what's going on. Part of it could be predisposition, and part of it could be your parenting style. If you're a little bit more rigid, you may have to try and relax a bit more, but it's not all of your fault. It's not your problem. You're not messing up your kid.
Well, I do have an aunt, and if she watches this, she knows I'm talking about her, that she raised her 3 kids with such, well, you know how normally you'd say, Claire, get away from that cupboard, you're going to hurt yourself. Well, my aunt would be like, Dylan, don't go near the stairs, you're going to fall down and break your femur, and you're going to, because she was in the medical field, so she knew exactly what would happen. And so these poor kids are just like,
Yeah, that could be a little anxiety provoking. Yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, just kind of ties into, she's a very, very knowledgeable person, and so she could actually tell them, this is a true consequence of this. And so she always worried that, oh my God, what did I do with my kids? So I think maybe, like you said, a little bit of that is how we act.
Absolutely.
And perhaps what we value as parents, right? Because if we value them being more careful, being more cautious, being a little bit more, dependent on us, maybe that gently kind of gives them that predisposition to be a little bit more anxious.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all how you approach them too. Like, if you're freaking out when they do something, they're going to learn, oh my God, something's bad. This is anxiety provoking. I shouldn't be doing this. Whereas if you're like, no, honey, don't touch that. The stove's hot. And kind of letting them know that way. Like, obviously, if they're about to go put their hand on it, you're going to freak out a little bit. But kind of explaining it to them and not reacting so much. And that's kind of your own stuff you have to help work on, is your own anxiety, your own calming skills, to learn that not everything is a crisis, and that you can just kind of relax and explain things to them calmly, and they will understand, hopefully.
Hopefully, and depending on the developmental level.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Younger children, obviously, we can't use language as effectively.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So with the guilt, I think that comes up for a lot of parents. Sometimes I think that guilt also makes them, I don't want to say give in, but makes them more likely to believe the anxiety.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing about anxiety is it's a cycle. The more you avoid things, the more it's just going to build up your anxiety. So while the tough love approach of just kicking them off to school may not be the most helpful, it also does help kind of break that anxiety. So you don't want to constantly just give in and be like, no, you don't have to go to school, it's okay, and then end up keeping them home till they're 18.
Yeah, and then some.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that can be really challenging because you don't want to be dismissive of their feelings.
Yes, absolutely.
And, the odd mental health day, right, is supposed to be very good for kids to be able to speak up and say, you know what, I'm just not feeling it today, I need to stay home. Right? But then I guess that's the other challenge of anxiety, is that anxiety is the what ifs.
Yeah.
Right? It's telling you all the things that could happen but probably won't. And by believing it, we're allowing it to get more powerful.
Absolutely. So it's ways to be empathetic and understand where the child's coming from, but also helping them break the cycle. So if they're afraid to go to school, talking to them about it. Once again, helping them identify their feelings, looking at the situational factors that might be happening, but helping them be able to go to school. One good thing that I've heard of being done from another practitioner that I work with is she recommends that the parent give the child something. This happens a lot with separation anxiety, where the child fears they have to be with the parent. They have to be there. So this way, if you give them a necklace or you give them a picture, they have that part of you with them. And then when they return home from school, they can give it back to you. So they know that you're going to be there to take back that item because they have that item with them throughout school. And they can look at it and it can be comforting to them.
I'm going to channel my dad here for a second. Well, what if, you do that and you're making them more anxious because now they are more, they're more thinking about you rather than focusing on school?
That's probably not going to happen.
Okay.
I mean, for the first time it might, but a lot of the times it's not. It's just going to be a comfort knowing that they're there, knowing that you have something you can look at if you need. That's what my mom did for me when I had anxiety before. She would give me this little moon necklace that I would go to school and I would have a part of her. And I was able to focus on school. Every now and then I'd kind of look at it and be like, oh yeah, Mom. But usually once you get in and you realize all those what ifs aren't happening, you get caught up in school and you're not really thinking too much about it.
Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting one to have something to hang on to. I remember being little, and we actually lived across the street from our school, so whenever we were going down to the cafeteria, I'd be able to look out and see my house, and I would feel really sad. I'd miss my mom, but it was good that it was right there. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious then if that tactic they're talking about is helping with object permanency. Mm-hmm. Because that's something that kids often don't develop early on if maybe they have some I don't want to say unstable living situations, but say, for a young child, an infant, that object permanency is like when mom leaves the room, she's gone forever.
Yeah.
Right.
And this lets you know that mom's going to come back. Mom's going to come and take this from you at the end of the day, then give it back to me the next day. So the mom's always going to be there. Mom's always a part of you. Mom's always there with you.
Mm-hmm. And that's got to be really helpful for making them feel more courageous too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And even responsible, right? Because you were responsible for this.
Yes.
So that does help. And the other thing that comes up too is self-soothing kits, boxes. And have you done some of those?
Absolutely. What's really good with kids is involving the 5 senses. So even making little kits of something that, like a picture of your family or a picture of your pet, something that is nice to look at that kind of reminds you of those happy feelings. Something that they like to taste. So not just like binge eating, but
yeah.
Gum or something that they have to hold in their mouth. Or a good one that I use is Aero bars because they have the bubbles.
Oh, yeah.
So you make them hold it in their mouth and feel the bubbles and kind of focus on making the bubbles pop and melt. Mm-hmm. Also soothing music if they like kind of listening to some things. Touch is a big one. So having little fidget objects, having something soothing. The one thing about the necklace my mom would give me is it was smooth on the back, and I remember that, and I would always kind of sit there and just kind of play with it a little bit, and that was really cool.
That's awesome. I feel like I need one of these
Yeah.
soothing kits. All right, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about children and anxiety. Welcome back to Let's Grow. I'm Linda Kelly, your host, and I'm here with Kelly Graham talking about children and anxiety. This is a really loaded topic for people, like I said, because I feel like there's, no matter what you do, there's guilt. There's no right way to handle this.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of parents that are going to watch this might feel frustrated because they've tried these things.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And some of them might not work for your child, and some of them might work for your child. It's trial and error, figuring out what works for you and your child. And that can be frustrating because you feel like, oh my God, nothing is ever going to work. But if you keep trying, there's something that will.
Mm-hmm. Right, and even just as time passes, the child continues to develop. Sometimes things come and go in phases. Mm-hmm. One example of exposure therapy that I've seen done was a child that stopped being able to go to school They did all of these things. They did self-soothing kit, relaxation skills, identifying the feelings. Parents were very, very involved. Still didn't work. So what they had to start doing was they forced her to go, but they did an exposure hierarchy, right? So an exposure hierarchy is obviously something that we do in therapy to establish what is the most anxiety-provoking thing that you can do, what's going to send you into a panic. For her, it was sitting at her desk, right? Because then you're in the middle of it. You're surrounded by, the lesson that's going on that you may not understand because you're in fight or flight, right? You can't pay attention or learn things when you're in that state of anxiety. And down to the lowest, which was putting on her shoes in the morning, right? So what they did was we had her rate her anxiety of this rating scale, 1 out of 10 putting on your shoes in the morning, 10 out of 10 being in the classroom, and gradually worked her up. And every single time she did something, she overcame an anxiety, or she was, got to that point that she was at the doorway of the classroom, we would have her breathe. Do your relaxation right here in the doorway of the classroom. And if that's all that you can do, because it's been a few weeks since you've even been in school, if that's all you can do, that's still a win. Yeah. Takes patience and time. Very, very frustrating. Especially for people that maybe didn't have parents that had that kind of patience or understanding.
And it's hard for us to have that patience and understanding. We have jobs, we have things to do, we have to cook and clean the house, and we have all of these things to do, but it's really important that we have that patience and we have that understanding to know that even if they're just overcoming these small little obstacles, that's huge for them. And they feel that proud accomplishment when you're like, look at you, like you were able to put on your shoes this morning. We made it this far. We made it this far. And they really go, wow, like, look, I did. I made it this far. And they feel proud of themselves. And it helps kind of build up their self-esteem that they can continue on to the next steps.
Right. And even understanding what this is. What do you think is the impact, or would be the impact, of a child learning this stuff, actually facing it, going through the exposure at a young age? Like, what do you think is the impact on the rest of their lives?
Huge. I mean, to know what anxiety is, what it feels like to you, and how you can help cope with it, that's huge, because you're going to face anxiety in your life throughout your whole life, and learning these skills early, it gives you a good foundation and a good base for what you're going to face in your life.
Especially when the things that are coming out to cause that anxiety are going to be bigger.
Absolutely.
A lot more difficult to overcome.
Yeah.
So it could be invaluable at a very young age to experience this, not to help them avoid something like this, but to experience it so that you know how to overcome it.
Absolutely. It's starting on a small scale. And while it can be frustrating and inconveniencing, it can be a good life lesson for them to learn. So it's kind of good that they have anxiety when they're little, so that they know how to handle it when they're older. Yeah. And they have you there with them. They're not on their own trying to figure this all out. They have you there with them, trying to help them get the skills, understand what anxiety is, understand what's triggering their anxiety. So that when they're older, they can go, okay, what kind of helped me before? Okay, I'll look at these things.
I recognize this. Things that worked for me before, especially if they have those things either written down or they just remember them somehow.
Absolutely.
Right. So what you're saying essentially with children and anxiety is kind of like with any other issue. First, acknowledge the problem.
Yeah.
Right. We don't want to ignore it.
No, absolutely.
You sure it won't just go away?
Yeah, no.
Okay. All right, shoot. So acknowledge the problem.
No.
Identify how it's affecting.
Let them know. Help them identify what their physical feelings are, what their emotional feelings are. Because they could just be so confused having all their feelings that they don't know what it is. So helping them really identify what it is and understand what anxiety is and what its purpose is too.
And then identifying the goal. Like, this is the problem we've defined. Now we need a goal. And then after that is just step by step how to overcome it.
Yeah, so you could try the different relaxation skills. You can try the different exposure therapies like that and kind of see what works. I know we have one practitioner who she was working with a kid who had separation anxiety, and it was hard for her to have the parents leave the room. So what she would do is she's like, okay, so your dad's going to leave the room for 10 minutes and then he's going to come and check on us, make sure everything's okay. She's like, okay. So they were able to go 25 minutes because the dad got distracted.
Oh, no.
And the dad came back and the daughter was absolutely fine. And she's just like, oh, hey. And then he's like, okay, I checked on you, you're fine. So we're going to go a little bit longer. And even just doing simple things like that around the house, just kind of building it up.
Right.
Will really help them kind of overcome it.
Well, it seems like, especially in that situation, you've taken a child that feels that they have no control,
Yep.
and you're giving them some semblance of control just by
Yes.
them knowing what to expect.
Absolutely. You know, if you tell them you're going to do something, make sure you stick to it. You know, if you say we're just going to put on your shoes today, make sure that you give them that option to just put on their shoes today. If they're like, no, absolutely, this is all I can do, don't be like, all right, well, no, your shoes are on, you're going to school, because then they're going to lose that trust, and it's going to build up that anxiety even more.
Yeah, basically, don't do what I do. Don't be an overachiever mom. So that's really, really good information. And we have just like half a minute left. What is a do not do advice for parents?
Don't ignore the problem, and don't tell them that they'll just get over it and it'll be fine. Because to them, this is something huge going on in their life right now, and they need you there.
And minimizing can have really big impacts later on.
Yes, absolutely. It can cause you to shut down your feelings and even your anxiety.
Yeah, it's probably half the reason most of us are in therapy in our 20s.
Yes.
So this is really, really helpful. I know that for a lot of parents, this is just the starting point. It's not going to solve the issue overnight.
Yes.
Like I've mentioned, even in real situations, sometimes it takes a month to overcome it, sometimes longer, sometimes it's a lifetime of just dealing with it. But I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this really important issue. And I'm sure we'll be able to talk again more about it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. See you next time.